On June 18, 1815, one decision changed the fate of Europe forever. A single delay, a single miscalculation, and it cost Napoleon Bonaparte everything. But what if it hadn't? By the summer of 1815, Napoleon was fighting for his survival. He had escaped exile on the island of Elba, reclaimed the French throne, and rebuilt his army in just 100 days. Across Europe, an alliance of nations, Britain, Prussia, Austria, and Russia, had already declared him an outlaw. They were coming for him, all of them. His only chance was to strike first and strike fast before the Allied armies could combine their forces against him. On June 16th, he defeated the Prussian army at Ligny. It should have been the beginning of a decisive campaign. Instead, it was the beginning of the end. Napoleon made a critical decision. He sent one of his most trusted commanders, Marshal Grouchy, with 33,000 men to chase down the retreating Prussians and make sure they couldn't regroup. But the Prussians didn't retreat the way Napoleon expected. Instead, under Field Marshal Blucher, they marched toward the British lines, toward the Duke of Wellington, to join the fight. Grouchy heard the distant sound of cannon fire at Waterloo. His officers begged him to march toward it. He refused. His orders were to follow the Prussians, and he intended to follow them to the letter. That single decision, a marshal obeying orders too rigidly, kept 33,000 French soldiers away from the battle that would decide the future of Europe. By the afternoon of June 18th, Napoleon's forces were locked in a brutal struggle with Wellington's army near a small Belgian village. For hours, the battle hung in the balance. Then late in the day, Blucher's Prussian army arrived on the field, exactly where Grouchy should have stopped them. Caught between two armies, Napoleon's forces collapsed. By nightfall, his army was in full retreat. 4 days later, he abdicated for the second and final time. He would spend the rest of his life in exile on a remote island in the South Atlantic and die there 6 years later. But imagine, just for a moment, a different afternoon. Imagine Grouchy ignoring his orders and marching his men toward the sound of the guns. Imagine those 33,000 soldiers slamming into Blucher's army before it could reach Wellington. Without Prussian reinforcements, historians widely agree Wellington's exhausted lines would likely have broken. Waterloo becomes a French victory. Napoleon doesn't fall in 1815. He stays in power, at least for a while longer. The coalition against him fractures, unable to agree on a united response to yet another French victory. Britain, financially and militarily drained after decades of war, may have pushed for negotiation rather than continued conflict. A negotiated peace could have left Napoleon ruling a weakened but intact French empire, with the map of Europe frozen in a very different shape for a generation. No swift restoration of the old European monarchies, no Congress of Vienna as we know it, possibly a different balance of power still influencing European borders today. And here's the strange part. Even Napoleon himself, years later in exile, reportedly reflected on that day, knowing exactly how close he'd come. One marshal's decision to follow orders too literally may have shaped the next 200 years of European history. No emperor, no empire, no war, all because one man, 33,000 soldiers, and one afternoon went a different way. History often turns on moments this small. If you want more real history and the what-ifs hiding inside it, subscribe, because next time we're asking what would have happened if one of the most powerful empires in history had never fallen at all.